My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and the day I said I'd do was the same day I realized I had been living a lie. Everything about that morning felt perfect. The music, the scent of roses, the warm light pouring through the church windows. My father's hand trembled slightly as he led me down the aisle, and for a moment, I thought it was from emotion. Now I know it was something else, a warning I didn't understand. Halfway through the ceremony, just as the priest began his words, the doors opened. And there she was, his ex, dressed in white. The entire church gasped. The priest froze mid-sentence, his eyes darting between her and my groom. I turned to look at Ethan, expecting confusion, but instead I saw recognition. A familiarity that cut deeper than betrayal itself. And then, I realized this wasn't an accident. She wasn't there to stop the wedding. She was there to finish what they had started. People always talk about the moment you know. That single spark when you realize you found the one. For me, that moment came one rainy afternoon when Ethan showed up at my door, soaked to the bone, holding a pizza box and a cheap bouquet of daisies. He smiled like he'd known me forever, and I laughed because he was ridiculous. Charming, confident, and just broken enough to feel real. We started dating soon after, and in the beginning, he made everything feel effortless. Every morning text, every kiss on my forehead, every I miss you. It all felt genuine. And maybe it was for a while. When he told me about his ex, Claire, he said it like a warning. She's part of my past, Em. We ended badly. Please don't ever let her come between us. I remember thinking how mature he was to bring it up so honestly. Now I realize he was just preparing the stage. Claire was a ghost in our relationship, never there, yet always present. Sometimes I'd catch Ethan staring off, his expression far away, like he was replaying a memory that didn't include me. He brushed it off, of course. Work stuff, he'd say. You're imagining things. Then came the strange coincidences. The texts he'd hide, the sudden business trips, the time he came home smelling faintly of her perfume, the same scent that lingered in his car weeks later. I wanted to believe him. I needed to, because after 2 years of building a life together, it was easier to doubt my instincts than to admit I'd chosen the wrong man. When he proposed, everyone said we were perfect. And I wanted that to be true, so badly that I convinced myself it was. But deep down, somewhere beneath the dress fittings and the floral arrangements, I felt it, that quiet whisper inside me saying, "You're not the only one wearing white in this story." I woke before my alarm, the kind of early that feels like an omen and not a gift. Sunlight threaded through the curtains in thin, honest lines. I lay there for a moment, listening to the house breathe, the fridge humming, the neighbor's dog barking 2 houses down, and told myself I was calm. I had practiced that calm in front of the mirror for months, the steady look of a bride who knows exactly what she wants. Today, I was supposed to want Ethan. Downstairs, my bridesmaids moved like careful birds. The coffee was already on. My mother kept asking if I'd eaten while adjusting the hem of my dress, and my sister fussed with a hairpin like she was taming a wild animal. Their noise should have been bomb. Instead it felt like tightrope wire under my feet. Every laugh made me flinch, as if sound itself might break something I hadn't yet noticed I was holding together. When Ethan texted, "See you soon. Can't wait. Love you," my phone buzzed like a metronome. Those words used to make my chest bloom. Now they did something else. They made me catalog memories, as if the right arrangement of small facts could spell out truth. The scent of his jacket on his pillow, the way he sometimes paused at the doorway when he thought I wasn't looking, the half-missed calls that disappeared from his call log. None of it was proof. None of it was accusation. It was a thread. At the florist's corner of the dining table, the bouquet we'd picked lay waiting, pale peonies and eucalyptus, soft and clean. I ran my fingers along a petal and felt guilty for the simple pleasure of it. There is an awkward intimacy in preparing beauty for an event that might fracture under it. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself that wedding mornings came with nerves, and nerves played tricks. Yet the tricks were consistent. The wedding planner called twice within the hour with questions about audio levels and video transitions, then apologized profusely for the vendor, who insisted on a last-minute equipment check. The vendor's name sounded familiar. Not a person I'd meet before, but a tone I could place, the tone of someone who orchestrates things and makes them feel inevitable. "Security," the planner said. "They want to double-check the feeds." My stomach rolled. Security at a wedding is sensible. Security for someone else's amusement is not. My sister, Tess, came to my room with 2 mugs and sat on the edge of the bed. She reached for my hand in a way that belonged to childhood. "Em, breathe," she whispered. "This is your day." I let her squeeze my fingers until my knuckles blanched. I wanted the swell of certainty she had, the uncomplicated faith that loved ones give when they are not the ones keeping score. The first small sign arrived with a laugh, Ethan's laugh from the hall, high and bright and too easy. I padded to the doorway and watched him through the crack. He was with his best man, Josh, who was fussing with a boutonniere. They were joking about something, shoulders close, ridiculous and relaxed. He looked at Josh and made a face I knew, the face he wore when he was performing for someone he wanted to impress. I watched him turn away and smooth his hair, a tiny, habitual adjustment that said more than any argument could. Later, a bridesmaid spotted a smear of a light floral perfume on the inside of Ethan's jacket sleeve as it hung on the chair. We joked about small comforts and somebody said, "Maybe it's from the dry cleaner." But dry cleaner smells aren't the same as the ghost of someone else's perfume that leaves a memory across your skin. The joke dissolved into a quiet that felt like a countdown. My mother called me into the living room to show me a text that had come in, a photo of the ceremony set up with the caption, "Looks perfect. Can't wait." The number was unknown, the message casual. My mother assumed it was the coordinator. I read it twice and felt the hair on my arms lift. That caption could belong to a vendor, or a friend, or the ghost of a past that never learned when to step out of the room. When the makeup artist arrived, she sat close and said, "You look amazing, Em." The way people say things they don't want to be proved wrong about. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to sink into the mascara and the pigments and emerge as the woman I'd always imagined becoming. Instead, each brush stroke felt like preparation for an audience I might not get to surprise. By 11, people were moving into cars, and the house filled with that scent, deodorant and last-minute cologne, that precedes a public performance. I pinned on my mother's locket, feeling its weight like a small, ancestral permission. I would walk down the aisle and fold my life into someone else's hands. I told myself that even if my heart had small alarms, it would not be the alarm that wrote the story. As the car rolled toward the chapel, the city opened up, and I watched my reflection in the window, a bride, composed, a small crease of resolve between my brows. The crease felt honest. It felt like a promise to myself more than to anyone else. I breathed in and out and thought, no matter what comes, I will not let someone else make a game of my life. If it is a performance, I will choose my final act. The church smelled like old wood and lilies, that kind of scent that hides both comfort and grief. People were already seated when I arrived, turning their heads with those polite wedding smiles that never quite reached their eyes. The organ hummed softly, a prelude floating through the air like a memory. I should have been nervous about walking down the aisle. Instead, I was distracted by the feeling that I was about to watch a play rather than live one. Ethan stood at the altar, his hands folded too tightly, his jaw moving as if he was chewing on words he couldn't swallow. When he saw me, he smiled, wide, practiced, rehearsed. It was the same smile he used on clients, the one that looked perfect in photographs but never quite belonged to me. Still, I smiled back. Because that's what you do when you've already built the fantasy, and all that's left is to act your part. As I walked down the aisle, the world seemed to narrow. Faces blurred, the music faded, and for a moment it felt like time itself was holding its breath. Then the doors at the back of the church opened. At first, no one turned. The sound was soft, a hesitant creak, like the church itself protesting. But then heads began to swivel, one by one, as a figure stepped inside. A woman, wearing white. Not ivory, not cream, white. The same shade as my dress. For a split second, my mind refused to understand. Maybe she was a late guest. Maybe she didn't realize. But then I saw Ethan's face. It drained of color. His lips parted. His eyes flicked to her with something between panic and recognition. And the priest, mid-blessing, stopped speaking. His voice faltered. The music died. The silence became a living thing. The woman walked forward with slow, deliberate steps. Her hair was pinned up, soft curls falling over her shoulders. In her hands, she held a small envelope, white as the dress she wore. People whispered. Someone gasped. My father tensed beside me. I kept walking, because stopping would mean admitting that this wasn't real, that this day, this love, this ceremony, was already collapsing around me. When I reached the altar, she was only a few rows away. Ethan didn't move. He didn't breathe. The priest looked between us, uncertain. "Should we?" he began, but no one answered. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, but her words carried like a blade. "I wasn't invited," she said, "but I was promised I'd be here." The church erupted in murmurs. I stared at Ethan, waiting for him to say something, anything. But his silence was an answer I already knew. "Claire." She looked at me then, straight into my eyes, and something like pity flickered across her face. "You should know the truth before you say yes," she said softly. "You deserve that much." Ethan took a step forward, his voice cracking. "Claire, stop. This isn't." But it was too late. She opened the envelope and pulled out a flash drive. "This," she said, "is your fiancé's idea of a joke." She handed it to the priest, whose hands shook as he looked between us. Someone near the back whispered, "Is this real?" And another voice answered, "It's happening." I could have screamed. I could have run. But something inside me turned to stone. I stood there, in front of the man I thought I knew, realizing that this moment, my wedding, had been rehearsed by everyone but me. The priest placed the flash drive into the church's projector system, hands trembling. The screen flickered to life behind us. I didn't want to turn around, but I did. The first image that appeared was of Ethan, sitting at a bar laughing. Claire next to him, recording on her phone. His voice filled the church. "She'll never see it coming. Emily always believes the best in people. That's her weakness." A murmur rippled through the room. My body went cold, but my mind was sharp, painfully crystal clear. That was the moment I stopped being the bride and became the witness. The lights dimmed as the projector came to life. 1,000 breaths held at once. You could feel the air tighten. How curiosity turns cruel when it isn't yours to carry. On the screen, the image stabilized. A dimly lit bar, the clinking of glasses, Ethan's laugh. He looked younger, freer, like a man unburdened by the idea of forever. Claire sat beside him, her hand brushing his arm as she tilted her phone. "So what's the plan?" she asked, teasing. "Simple," he said. "I make her fall harder. We get the wedding. Then I walk. She'll still be thanking me for teaching her a lesson." Laughter, hers, the bartender's faint echo filled the church. It was the kind of sound that leaves you wanting to scrape your skin off. Someone in the pews muttered, "Oh my God!" Another voice whispered, "Turn it off." But I stood there, frozen, my bouquet trembling in my hands like a dying heartbeat. The video cut to another clip, his text messages flashing across the screen. Claire's voice narrated softly. "He said he missed me the week he proposed to you. I thought you should see that." Gasps, shifting bodies, whispers. The soundtrack of a public unraveling. Through it all, Ethan just stood there. No denial, no apology, just stunned silence, like someone caught by his own reflection. The priest fumbled for the controls. "I think that's enough." But Claire's voice from the back stopped him. "No, she deserves to see all of it." The next clip showed Ethan in his tux, speaking to Josh, his best man, 2 nights before the wedding. "She's so eager to make it perfect. It's pathetic." "You sure she won't find out?" Josh asked. "Even if she did," Ethan said with a smirk, "she'd forgive me." Emily always forgives. That line hit me harder than the rest. Because it was true. At least, it had been. Something inside me cracked then. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly. Like the sound a heart makes when it finally stops pretending. The video ended with a freeze frame of Ethan's face, smiling. The screen went black. Silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply placed the bouquet down on the altar, petal by petal. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. "You were right, Ethan. I do forgive, but not this time." He stepped toward me. "Emily, please." "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "You had your stage. Now I'm taking mine." I turned to the guests. Our families, our friends, the strangers who suddenly knew more about my life than I ever wanted them to. "Let this be the last time any of you call what he did love." Claire's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "I'm sorry." I nodded once. So am I. But thank you for showing me the truth. Then I walked down the aisle alone. No music. No applause. Just the sound of my heels against the floor and the shattering of an illusion behind me. Outside, the air was sharp and cool. The sun hit my skin, and for the first time in months, I felt something clean. I could hear the noise inside the church, voices rising, chaos spinning, but I didn't look back. At the bottom of the steps, I took off my veil, folded it neatly, and handed it to a little girl standing nearby. She looked at me wide-eyed, unsure. It's just fabric, I told her. Don't let anyone tell you it's magic. And then I walked away. The photographers, the guests, the questions, none of it mattered. Because in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the woman waiting to be chosen. I was the woman who finally chose herself. For the first few days, I didn't leave my apartment. The world outside was loud, and I didn't have the strength to face its curiosity. Every ping of my phone felt like another intrusion. News outlets asking for exclusive rights. Acquaintances offering support with too much fascination in their voices. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my name. By day 3, my wedding had turned into content. Clips of the video were everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. Headlines bloomed like weeds. The bride who exposed her groom at the altar. Wedding turns into scandal. Betrayal goes viral. I stopped checking. I stopped eating. I just existed. Somewhere between shame and relief. Because even though the world was watching, at least the pretending was over. It wasn't until Claire showed up at my door that the silence finally cracked. I didn't recognize her at first. She looked different, smaller somehow, like the weight of what she'd done had started to cave her in. She held a cup of coffee and a letter. I shouldn't be here, she said. Then why are you? She took a breath, her voice trembling. Because I wanted you to know it wasn't revenge. It was guilt. I didn't answer. She went on, eyes glassy. He told me he loved me after he proposed to you. I believed him. I thought if I showed up that day, maybe he'd choose me. But when I saw your face, she broke off, I realized he never loved either of us. He just loved being adored. There was nothing to say. For a long moment, the only sound was the clock ticking between us. Then I did something that surprised even me. I reached for the coffee cup, took a sip, and said quietly, "Thank you for showing me the truth." Her shoulders sagged, like she'd been waiting for permission to breathe. "You don't hate me?" she asked. "I don't have room for hate anymore," I said. "It takes up the space I need to rebuild." When she left, I closed the door and stood there for a while, letting the quiet settle. And then, for the first time in weeks, I cried, not because I was broken, but because I wasn't. After that day, I started piecing my life back together. Little things at first. Going for morning walks, repainting the apartment, deleting old photos from my phone. Each act felt like reclaiming oxygen. My therapist told me something that stuck. Trauma doesn't end when the noise stops. It ends when you stop needing the noise to feel alive. So I turned the noise off. I shut down social media, quit the job where Ethan and I first met, and started freelancing from home. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. One morning, I saw a notification in my email inbox. Video rights inquiry, major network. For a moment, I hovered over it. Then I clicked delete. I didn't need to profit from my pain. That story wasn't theirs to tell anymore. A month later, my mother called. She sounded lighter than she had in years. "You sound different, honey," she said. "I feel different," I told her. Maybe for the first time. After we hung up, I sat by the window with a notebook and began writing. Not a diary, something else. A story. Not about Ethan. Not about Claire. About a woman who walked away from the altar and didn't look back. When I finished the first page, I smiled. The world could keep its videos, its headlines, its drama. I had something better, a beginning that was mine. Healing didn't happen in a cinematic montage. It came in fragments, messy, uneven, and painfully human. Some mornings I'd wake up feeling almost normal. Others, I'd stand in the shower until the water ran cold, replaying every detail I wished I could forget. But over time, the memories stopped screaming. They began to whisper. And eventually, they became background noise, the kind you can live with. I moved to a smaller apartment across town. Nothing fancy. White walls, a balcony overlooking a little park, and just enough quiet to hear myself think. For the first time in months, I slept without the light on. I started reading again, the books I used to love before everything became a headline. I began running in the mornings, not to escape, but to breathe. And somewhere between mile 3 and 4, I realized that I wasn't running from Ethan anymore. I was running toward myself. It was during one of those runs that I met Luke. He worked at the coffee shop near the park, always sketching something on napkins when the line was slow. The first time we talked, it wasn't romantic. It was simple. He asked if I was training for something. I said, life. He laughed, not like Ethan's rehearsed laugh, but the kind that feels like an exhale. Weeks passed. We talked more. About books, movies, the weird ways people try to look happy online. He never asked about the video, and I never offered it. Maybe he didn't know. Or maybe he did, and decided it didn't matter. One morning, I found a napkin slipped into my cup sleeve. It said, "Peace looks good on you." I smiled all day. But the truth is, I wasn't ready for love, not the kind that makes promises. What I found in Luke wasn't romance, it was kindness. And kindness, after everything, felt revolutionary. Months later, I visited the church again. Not for closure, not for revenge, just to see it. The same aisle, the same altar. Empty this time. Sunlight spilled through the stained glass, painting the floor in colors I hadn't noticed before. I stood where I once said nothing and whispered, "Thank you for ending what was never meant to last." I walked outside, breathing in the crisp air, the weight gone. That night, I posted something on my long-forgotten social account. Not the story, not the scandal. Just a single sentence. I survived loving someone who didn't know how to love. The comments poured in. Not pity, not gossip, just connection. Women and men writing, "Me too." And for the first time, I felt like my voice wasn't trembling anymore. It was steady, strong, real. Maybe someday, love will find me again. Maybe it already has, in the way I look at the sunrise and don't ache anymore. In the way I can say Ethan's name without feeling small. In the way I can sit with silence and call it peace. Because love isn't what happens at the altar. It's what you choose every morning after the world tries to break you, and you still decide to open your heart anyway. If you told me a year ago that I'd walk away from my own wedding, I would have laughed. Back then, I believed that love meant holding on no matter what. Now I know love sometimes means letting go before it destroys who you are. I don't hate Ethan anymore. I don't even think about him, not really. Because he's just a chapter, one that taught me what I will never accept again. And if you asked me what I learned, I'd say this. No one can play with your heart unless you hand them the rules of the game. And the day I walked out of that church, I stopped playing by anyone else's. The truth is, I didn't lose anything that day. I gained myself, the woman who no longer needs to be chosen to feel worthy. The woman who no longer confuses attention with love. The woman who finally understands what peace sounds like. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? If this story touched you, like the video, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more stories where heartbreak turns into rebirth.